Good afternoon, and welcome to the Board of Health meeting of April 24th, 2023. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording this meeting, please notify the chairman. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extensions of March 12, 2020 and July 15, 2022, orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, Chapter 30A, Section 20 until March 31st, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Board of Health is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Sorry about that. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as proceeded for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410. Conference ID is 309-679-083#, or they may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Now I'll turn the meeting over to our chairman, Dr. Noble Hanson.
It shall be the policy of this board to conduct its meetings under the open meetings law so as to encourage public participation whenever time permits and as part of agenda item discussions. We have 3 items on the agenda for tonight, but first let's establish a quorum. So as I call your name, say present. Dick Edwards.
Present.
Carol Boyce.
Present.
Noble Hanson, I'm here. So we have our quorum. And the first item is a variance hearing for 48 Overlook Drive, Clark Engineering, and I think David Clark is here.
Good afternoon, David Clark, Clark Engineering, on behalf of the applicants. What they're proposing is to demolish an existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, sorry. So what the applicants are proposing is to demolish an existing dwelling and reconstruct. It was found out during the planning process that the existing leach pit is too close to the existing house, and obviously it'll be too close to the new house. So we're here asking for a 6-foot variance from the leach pit to the foundation. We feel that the same level of protection to the environment is afforded as the existing conditions.
You're not replacing the existing septic system,
No,
correct?
not touching it. That's the
My
purpose.
comment is, the second paragraph is incorrect. So he's just looking for a variance from the existing septic system to the
New
foundation.
Yeah.
So it's not a cesspool?
No, it's a Title V system, a septic tank and a leach pit.
It's a cesspool.
I know.
So the current
That was my
septic
mistake.
tank and leaching pit conforms to Title V?
The leach pit conformed to the 78 code,
78 code?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
and it passed inspection when they bought it in 2017.
Okay, so there's no change to that, it's just
No.
a variance for the leaching pit to the house. Okay, questions from the board?
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I'm looking for the leaching pit on this,
Where is it?
on this diagram. I see something that says approximate location of existing septic components.
I think it's this.
Where is the leaching field?
It's the circular structure next to the shed.
On the
we-
north side of the property.
It's
The
round.
thing that says approximate location of existing septic components.
Yep. And
So that's the leach,
it's the leach pit.
and where's the rest of the system?
The tank, The tank is on,
OST is the tank?
the ST is the septic tank, correct.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then, just looking at the floor plan, so the usual type question, on the second floor, there's a bedroom, there's one on the first floor, there's one on the second floor, and then there's the large open room, and that's not considered a bedroom, Judy, because, is that just a partial wall by the stair, is that it?
Yes. And it's-
Second floor, there's a bedroom, and then there's like one large room, but it looks
Yeah, that's all open to the stairs.
open to the staircase, so there's no privacy, right?
Yeah,
So that staircase come up, on the left-hand side of the staircase is just a railing, and there's no wall there.
correct.
Okay, and I think Judy has, one of the conditions is that the current septic system be inspected and pass inspection. But maybe Judy can, well, we can get, anyone want to put forward a motion on this?
I move that we approve.
I'll second.
Okay, so, and then any public comment on this variance for 48 Overlook Drive? Okay, maybe Judy can read the conditions for the record.
Yeah, the system was last inspected in 2017, I think.
Yeah, when they bought it,
So I feel that a new inspection by a certified Title V inspector be submitted for review. The applicant should also restrict this property to a maximum of 2 bedrooms and record it, the restriction on the deed at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. The applicant shall submit a copy of the executed deed restriction to the board. The engineer shall submit an engineered as-built plan, including as-built elevations, with a written certification that the system has been installed in accordance with the approved plan, and no alteration to the floor plan of the dwelling would be allowed without further review by the Board of Health or its agent.
So you want us to dig up the system and do an as-built plan?
The deed box in the pit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and take a vote. We have a motion to approve the variance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. Okay, then that
Thank you very
passes.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda is Board of Health review of short-term rental regulation. And at last meeting, we had our open hearing, and we listened to a number of public questions and concerns. Judy has put out to the board members a list of those public questions and concern that came up out of that we might go over beforehand, and then we can open up to the public in follow-up of that public hearing. But I might just say, just to put perspective on it, so this whole thing, because there was some concern that this was new when they were stunned and hadn't heard of it, but this goes back really to 2017 when a working group for a short-term rental bylaw was formed, and that composed some select board members, health board members, some other people. They put forward a regulation, short-term rental bylaw, actually, that went to the select board. The select board didn't turn it down, but they referred it back to a number of committees for more public input and discussion, and that just kind of didn't go anywhere. It never came back to the select board. So we've brought forward a new draft for short-term rental regulation. And the history of that is, at the end of the summer, we got interested in an occupancy number for homes instead of counting bedrooms, and then the issue of a short-term rental regulation came up. It often included in that is an occupancy limit. We asked the select board to put together a new working group, which was formed, and Kim Bursman made an excellent statement at the open hearing about that. that worked September, October, November, December, I think into January, hour-long meetings, several hours, and came up with a short-term rental regulation. The working group felt it was better to be done as a regulation. They actually asked the Board of Health if we would be willing to do it. We said we would be. That went to the Select Board with a draft copy, and the Select Board voted 4-1 to have the Board of Health do this short-term regulation. That kind of brings us here. I say that the working group, which was a very diverse group of people, included people who rented, rental agents, Select Board, Health Board, that group voted 10-1 for this, basically the same rental regulation we have right now. So that kind of brings us to where we are. Another thing that came up in the, I'll be quick here, in the public discussion is, this isn't something that's new. I think it's 11 of the 15 towns on the Cape have short-term rental regulation or bylaws, and they've been in place for years, and, you know, they've been working. So there was a lot of information out there about how other towns go about this. Nantucket and Tisbury also have them. Nantucket passed theirs in the fall, just recently. Another thing I'll reemphasize is that during all these discussions, there was never, to my knowledge, any discussion, thought of trying to limit things or put a number on how many per street or a number of short-term rentals in the town. That's never been part of the discussion, really. And it was in fact thought that if we put together reasonable regulations, that the vast majority of people renting, mom and pops, whoever, would already be complying with this just to take good care of their own property. This would just, it would be a small number of people who are creating the problems. So that's just kind of background. So what we can do now, I think, is just kind of run down this list and throw it out to board members, who hopefully will help discuss these things. But the first one that came up was some kind of a short form, a downloadable maybe, short form that would be posted in a rental property to give the important information, which raised one question in my mind. What is our requirement for posting of the regulation and the application inside the rental property? Do we have we, I'm not sure, it was in an earlier draft. I don't think I'm not sure it's in this draft.
I don't think there's anything about posting in this.
But I mean, it would be pretty clear that an owner would be responsible to have their tenants be aware of the short-term regulations.
Yeah, we do have a registration number, certificate number shall be included on any listing. But as far as posting, I think that's a great idea. I think it would be, you know, the staff would be able to put together something that could be easily posted and provide information to the tenants. I mean, that's what this is all about, is to provide information for the tenants. And we would also have a lot of information on a website that we will be creating as part of this as well. So
Right, so that short form wouldn't have to be part of the regulation, but it would be something that could be developed during the administration.
Right.
And the example that we got here was just registration number, address, maximum occupants, owner agent, telephone numbers, Board of Health, police, emergency numbers, and then just a note about parking. But that's a good example.
Yep.
We might do something like that. We could just include as part of the administration of this. But other comments about a postable short-term or for the rental?
Is the certificate going to be posted in the rental?
it's not a requirement, according to this. Again, that's something that we could recommend or add in.
Because the certificate would include the number of occupants.
Do we actually generate a certificate that's separate from the signed affidavit in regulation?
We are going to issue a certificate, so,
Okay.
so we could,
Because it would be reasonable, I would think, to have a copy of the certificate posted
right.
In the rental, yeah.
in the rental, and that would show the maximum number of occupants. Yeah, that would be on the certificate.
And then one of the residents gave us a copy at the last meeting. That's just but it would be something like that. But I think that could be developed as part of the administration and go out with the registration when it's
Right.
performed and not be, we don't have to redo it, put it into the regulation itself, so.
Right.
Okay, so I think that was a good idea. That could be something that's downloadable that they can then post in the property. The next thing that is on the list here is the response time. And it's a 1 hour response time is in the regulation. I think there was some confusion. That is to be available, which means it could be a phone call. It doesn't mean in person. But some people voiced concern that 1 hour was difficult if you didn't have an agent. But I'll just throw that out to the board. Is there any thought on?
Yeah, I thought some of the comments were appropriate, and, the one comment that if somebody has a bedroom in their home that they're renting and they go to the Orpheum, and shut their cell phone off, they're not available during the time that they're watching the movie. So I think it might be reasonable to increase it to 2 hours.
Yeah, I think the Nantucket regulation that passed this fall, I think it was a 2 hour contact time.
Yeah, I think 2
but I mean-
hours would be very reasonable.
Yeah, so I think that's fine. That's, makes it easier. I would think that if you're renting your place, that you would want to be pretty available for emergencies and somebody's hurt or a fire or a water pipe burst or whatever. And should we vote on, if we wanted to change it from 1 hour to 2 hours? We could just add that to the regulation. That's not enough of a change that we didn't need in the public hearing, but we could probably,
Yeah, we can vote at the end, I think, to approve the regulation with that change.
yes.
The
Yeah, we'll probably,
changing
yeah,
from 1 hour to 2 hours.
right. We can,
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
yeah, I think what we'll do is, what I thought was, I thought about voting today, but I think John's not here. I think we might, next Monday, we have another meeting. So I think we'll put this together, then Judy can do a final draft.
I wouldn't delay it. Why do you want to delay it?
Well, I personally.
I mean,
well, I'll do
John's
it.
in favor of this, and there's a quorum here. I mean, I'm not going to be here next week.
Oh, you are not,
I'll be in
okay.
Croatia.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
just for that, I don't see.
Yeah,
a
we can,
reason.
so, okay, so that would be, yeah, so that one change,
Okay,
we can note that. Okay, so, and Carol, would you, 1 to 2 hours is reasonable? Yeah.
2 hours.
And Judy, I mean, I didn't notice the Nantucket one was 2 hours, so,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think people should be assured that, it's kind of a 2 hour time period or 1 hour. If people don't get back to us right at 2 hours, it's not like we're gonna hold people and, to that and bring them in before the
Yeah.
board. If they, that's just, we want people to realize that they need to be accessible to answer to any issues that come up, so. But yeah, I think 2 hours is fine.
Right. Okay. There was a comment, a couple of comments, that these, the short-term rental regulations would cut into a homeowner's ability to make a living or limit what they do, or, as I said, there's no intention of limiting the numbers and that sort of thing. I think our baseline thinking was, with reasonable regulations like I think we have here, that the vast majority of renters would have, it wouldn't change anything for them significantly. It would just be a few of the outliers would have to make some adjustments.
Right, we're not going to prevent anybody from having a short-term rental.
No.
We're going to prevent them from having an inappropriate short-term rental with far more people in the home than the septic system can accommodate. That's basically the crux of this.
And I
And that
think,
isn't going to deny anybody a living.
right, I think there was a question about who gets denied a permit, but I don't envision anybody being denied a permit. I mean, you fill out the registration and the regulation, and you have that, and then if you want to rent your residence as a short-term rental, then you go ahead and rent it. So there's no, I don't envision, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, any situation where somebody would apply and they would be denied.
No.
Unless they refuse to have a fire extinguisher or smoke detectors
That would
or
come up
something
down the
like
road.
that.
Right.
That would be the only
I mean, I think we
reason.
envision this as a framework for people to work from with a set of rules, a guidance for homeowners that are renting their properties. And we're not going to deny anybody. We're just going to put some, I think, common sense rules attached to them.
Okay. Another issue was, a resident mentioned criteria to allow a permit, which I think I just addressed, and criteria to rent a home. Once you have your registration, you've signed it, gone through the affidavit, have the regulation, then you can go ahead and rent your home. And then a comment about whether it's unfair or limits the rights of homeowners. Anybody want to take that one on?
Well, it only limits the right of a homeowner to do something that's completely inappropriate, like put 28 people in a house with 4 bedrooms. That's the only limitation.
Right.
Now, there was a comment that it was unfair to put limits on people who are renting their homes while the person across the street might have his extended family come for the 4th of July weekend and have more than the number of people the septic system can accommodate for 4 or 5 days. But that's a completely different story, and there really isn't anything that the Board of Health can do about that. But that's not extending over the whole period of a summer vacation period.
Right.
What happens over a 4th of July weekend may be inappropriate, but it's not anything as concerning as doing it for a full 20-week rental season. So, anytime you put any regulation into effect, you're going to limit people's rights to do things that are inappropriate, and that's what the purpose of the regulation is.
Yeah. And I think that rights of the homeowner, these are homeowners who have chosen to, in a sense, make their private residence a business. They're renting it out. The state, I guess maybe a year ago, they, for cottage colonies and B&Bs and motels and boarding rooms, they require that those places be registered with the state, and they collect a tax on them as their businesses. But then a year, that's been going on for a while, but then a year ago, the state included short-term rentals in that group of businesses, and they must register with the state, and they must pay a tax as well. So
I think that,
has carved out that group as well.
I think we're trying to make the short-term rentals on par with the motels and the cottage colonies that for, probably 40 years or more have been required to not only pay taxes, but also comply with health and safety rules and regulations for the people renting those properties. And so we go in annually and inspect and check for, proper windows and screening devices and smoke detectors and CO detectors, and make sure everything is safe. And so we're just extending that to the short-term rental community, which is a business and should be treated the same way as these hotels and motels and cottage colonies have been for forever.
And those businesses pay a fee, correct?
They pay an annual inspection fee, and we visit them every year with the building inspector and the fire inspector.
Right. And we did have one resident who has a small cottage colony who felt that the rules were fair and wouldn't affect what he's already doing. In fact, he thought, to his point of view, it was fair that the short-term renters had to follow the same rules that he already is following, so.
Right.
Okay, so we can, the next Why was a 14-day or less exclusion removed? Maybe Judy can explain.
So I think I tried to explain that the last time, that when we originally put that in, we thought that the state law said that if you rented for less than 14 days, you didn't have to pay taxes, or you didn't have to register. It does say that you have to pay taxes, you don't have to pay the taxes, but you still have to register, even with the state. So, so we decided to leave that in for that reason, so that we have an adequate, and we know exactly who's renting out and who's not.
Right, so everybody that is a short-term renter needs to register with the town.
Right.
That's what the state does. So a question came up, well, if I just am renting for one weekend, must I register? And that, I think that's what the state requires you to do.
Right.
And so we're kind of following that, and we would do it the same. And registering just means, going through the affidavit, giving that information, doing the regulations, and the fee is less than a lot of other fees in other towns. So that's, we think, reasonable.
Pretty straightforward, yeah.
Okay, let's see. The next one, why are the rules only for those who rent out their properties? Well, that we discussed, private versus rentals. What about summer residents who have parties and park on the streets? And then we get a little bit into the issue of who's responsible. If it's a noise issue or a street parking issue, the police department handles that. But anybody want to make a comment on explanation of that?
Yeah, I think
There's overlap
that
with
if people are having a party at the house and they're blocking the street or have too many cars on the street, that's a police issue. If they're making a lot of noise, that's a police issue. If those residents are paying a fee to stay overnight, then it becomes a short-term rental and they need to register with us.
Right.
Right, and I think it gets to the next issue, which is who gets called. So I think there's was a little bit of confusion of who gets called. You can, the health department is going to administer the short-term rental regulation, and they will take any call and sort of triage for somebody who's responsible. They're going to keep a database of complaints on specific properties and build that up for review later on. If it's noise, that does go to the police, but the health department would like to hear that too, so they can enter it into their database. And I'm sure there'll be some coordination with the police department in the whole administration of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, the police department told me they get probably 700 plus noise complaints during the summer, but they have no way now of knowing whether these are short-term rentals or just people having a random party. So I'm hoping that, as part of this process, they'll have a list, they'll have our list or have access to our list, and then, so when they respond to something, even if we haven't been notified, they can notify us directly and let us know that it is a short-term rental. And then if we see that it's an ongoing situation, we can address it with the.
Yeah,
owners.
although noise isn't in our regulation as
No.
written, if it turned out that there were X number of short-term rentals in Chatham that were repeatedly creating problems with noise and were repeatedly called by the police, and in our database we found that this was something that was recurring, well, that we might want to put a noise regulation, we might want to modify the regulation, put a noise one, or it would rise to the level of a public nuisance, and the Board of Health can deal with public nuisances in a different way.
And the town does have noise bylaws.
Right.
And they're not just at night, they're
Right.
all day, so.
Right, right. So, it would be possible to have a hearing and call a person who's renting their property in and say, look, every week for the last
If it was a repeated
2 months,
problem,
we've been getting complaints about this noise. What's your plan? How are you going to deal with this? And if they say, well, we don't care, well, then that rises to another level, and we would have to deal with it.
But I'd say if a resident has a question about there's something down the street, is that a short-term rental? I think they'll, as I envision it, they'll be able to call the health department, and the names of the short-term renters will be public information. They can find out if in fact that house is a short-term rental, and then there's some other rules. And I would just say one other thing, to follow up what Dick said. Our initial interest was occupancy with the septic usage and the usage of the house. As it went through the whole process and through the select board and was put back to us, you know, this thing, it mentions the sewer, water, but also not negatively impact the quality of life in residential neighborhoods is kind of put in there as part of it, so it's become a little broader. So we want to collect all the complaints, noise, and whatever, and then kind of go from there.
And we're going to revisit these regulations on a regular basis, and if we find that noise complaints are a major problem, we can always add a paragraph about noise. And then we could call an owner in and say, you're violating the regulation, which now includes noise, a paragraph, and they could, you know, be fined or lose their certificate on that basis.
Right, so we could change these, we could adjust these. It would require us to make a proposal, go through a public hearing for public comment, and then change it.
Right.
But we could do that at any time, and the working group felt a bylaw, you have to wait for town meeting and go through, get a warrant article to make any change. With a regulation, we can do this on an easier basis, and it may work both ways. It may be that something is cumbersome, it doesn't work the way that there are people trying to register, and we can correct something that's a problem too. It's not just something that we add on to it in terms of a regulation.
Yep.
So it works both ways. Rules about noise, we've talked about that, I think. What about properties that rent out for events, weddings, tents, and those sorts of things? And that's something that's come up, and I think Judy knows a little bit about, because you get into zoning issues.
So on our working group, we did have someone from community development, and I've had lots of discussions with our community development director. Events such as weddings and large venues, it's really a zoning issue, and that's something that they want to look at more. But I think we all agreed that we would start with this process, see how it goes, and then if we need to refine it, or if the zoning board, I think the zoning board or the planning board are looking at this also separately from us. So those are discussions that are going to be had by the town.
So you know, now, if you're going to put a tent up on your residence and have
You do need a tent permit.
You need a tent
There are rules.
that comes from whom?
It goes through the building department. There's an application process, and it gets reviewed. Every tent that goes up in town. So every time CBI puts up a tent, or any house on Old Harbor Road, there's several different properties that kind of do this regularly, the golf courses, et cetera. They get a permit, they tell us how many people are gonna be at the event, what the tents are. The tents have to be flame retardant and all meet certain specifications for safety. So we do know that. So it's helpful that if the police do get a complaint about a noise or parking, they will know that there's an event going on, and we have some information as to who to get in touch with now for those. So it was a big problem during COVID. We were getting hundreds and hundreds of tent permits coming through because no one
Are
could.
there other events that need to register, like, how do you do it, like a wedding or
It doesn't matter what the event is.
no matter what the event
It's
is?
just if you're putting a tent up,
A tent up, but.
yeah, a commercial tent, or even a not commercial tent, I guess, for a large event.
Okay,
How does that impact the septic?
It really doesn't. You know, there's no real impact on them. They're temporary, and they're not,
temporary,
Yeah.
living there.
they're staked in, but they're not, there's nothing that would impact the septic.
Yeah, unless a property owner decides to convert his property into a venue and have a wedding or a bachelor party or a gender reveal party or whatever every week and have
Yeah, I think a
50
lot of those.
people in their
I think they-
backyard every week, well, then but that's not an occupancy, that's not a rental.
Right.
Unless they're
Many
staying
times there'll be
overnight there.
porta toilets put up as well for these events, so. But yeah, that could be a problem, but I think people, they're taking that risk if they're overusing their septics like that to have events.
But those sorts of things could come in as a complaint that would get registered on the database, but it would be nothing we might be able to do
Well,
about
they're
it.
not short-term rentals, so it wouldn't.
Well, some of them are, I
Yeah.
mean, you
Well,
don't
if
know.
they are, then
We'll
that's a
know.
different story, but if they're not
Oh, okay.
short-term
Some of,
rentals.
what I do know is some of the rental agencies have rules. They don't allow events in their short-term rentals, so it depends on the property.
Okay. The next, is the information on the registration forms public? So we talked about this before, and Judy maybe addressed this, but I think things that come into the health department, I mean, complaints that we get now in the form of letters and all are all public. The addresses, they're public. The Chronicle can call and get information for an article. But Judy maybe can address what's public. So I think they're talking about, so you have your database, you have a list of all the registered names and contact. What of that?
I mean,
is public?
everything is public if there's a public a request for information. So we will have that information. We won't have it out there on a database that
It
the
won't all,
public
it
can.
won't all be on the town website.
No, it won't be something that the public can, access easily. They could call us and say, I want to know who owns this house, just like they can go in the assessor's records now and find out who owns the property.
The only thing
Who's
in the
renting
health realm that isn't public is personal health information.
Right.
If we discover that somebody has COVID-19, that's not public. You can't
Right.
go and.
So I will clarify that as far as giving out names and whatever we have on our registration form with our town council, but my understanding is that everything that we have in our records is public, as long as it's not in violation of HIPAA laws.
Right.
So-
Right, we can vet that, yeah. So it might come up, if there's a short-term rental on the street and the neighbor is complaining, and in the registration, there's the contact person and a phone number. I mean, did that phone number go out to a neighbor? I think some of it is, if it comes into the town department, it may be public, but we can clarify that.
Yep. And I'm gonna do that before, try and get that answer within the next week.
Right, and that'll be part of the administration and how the process develops.
Yeah, I guess if you're running a business, you lose some of the privacy rights that you would otherwise have to keep your telephone number private or whatever. If you're advertising and renting your place as a business, then there has to be a way to contact you.
Right.
Okay, and then there was concerns about the number of cited state laws and town regulations, numbers of state laws in the regulation that are referred to. That came up several times. And I think that Judy can address this some more, but those regulations that are referred to, they are already in place. They're a part of the state law or the town regulations. They're already in effect, and there are no new parts of those regulations that we've put in place. We're just referring back to things that already exist. But Judy, because that came up a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, whenever the Board of Health puts a regulation together, we have a certain authority given to us under Mass General Law, so of course we refer to that authority, Chapter 111, Section 31. We refer to, actually, some of these that we refer to in the short-term rental definition are excluding hotels listed under MGL Chapter 140, and lodging establishments and their Mass General Law requirement. Some of the other things that we cite are septic system regulations. You know, a house has to, if it has a failing septic system, regardless of it's a short-term rental or not, it has to meet those regulations. Any dwelling has to meet general laws and regulations from the state for safety and sanitation, again, whether you're renting it or you're living there. So all those are cited. Those are the big ones, I think. There may be something in here about fire safety regulations.
I think there was some concern that those regulations include things like, you know, the kind of counters that a food service business would need to have, what kind of ceilings they need to have. And, you know, but the Board of Health regulation has nothing to do with those details in those We're not going to be saying that somebody who's renting their property has to meet the standards of a food service organization in terms of the way their kitchen is laid out.
Right.
You know,
But they do need to
Right.
meet regulations of the housing code
Right,
for
right,
safe egress.
Right, but he said he read the whole regulation. He saw things in there about what kind of counters you could have and what kind of ceilings you could have and what and you know, that doesn't apply to a home.
No. So,
Okay. The next one on the list here, it's come up repeatedly, need to have more data or have the data before we make the regulation. And it was discussed at length in the working group. And basically, Judy can address this too, but we don't really have the data because there's never been a registration. Most towns have a registration of short-term rentals. In fact, a lot of them have of rentals, and they do collect data. So part of this is to create a registration of short-term rentals in order to collect the data and have a list of complaints and what the problems are and aren't, and that will be reviewed. And there's a mandatory public review. It's 3 years, but you know, we can, if we see a need, we can do that at any time, really. But I don't know if somebody else, Judy, do you want to talk about the data part of it, or? No, I think that's pretty.
mean-
As we collect data, we may find some things that we're not aware of, and we may need to amend the regulations.
Right.
For example, if the data shows us that noise is a big problem, we might need to amend with regard to noise. If dogs are a big problem, we might need to have some kind of a statement in there about how many dogs you can have in a short-term rental. But right now, we don't have the data, so we'll just
Yeah,
collect
basically, it
the
was
data.
felt that we needed a registration to collect the data, and to say, well, let's get the data before we do anything would be just kicking the can down the road, and we wouldn't really ever be able to do anything.
Right.
Okay, should, dog restrictions came up, that would be a tough one to administer. That's, if the main complaint is noise, really, that would be a noise thing, which I guess would be a police department thing. I'm sure they get called for barking dogs. But that's not something we have in this short-term rental thing.
No, and that should be the owner's
Right, that's not-
responsibility
I
if
think
they
that's
want to
really-
allow a dog or not.
it's not in our purview at this point. I mean, if we have issues with animals, we do have an animal control officer who can get involved. So if people are leaving a dog, you know, outside tied up, I mean, the animal control officer will go over and take care of it.
I think somebody complained that there was an aggressive dog at a short-term rental that was frightening them. Well, we have an animal control
Right.
Right.
officer for that.
So,
Okay, one other thing that came up in my mind, the issue of bylaw, the word bylaw is cited in the parking rules, in the regulation. I think it's in the affidavit part. The on-street parking, no overnight on-street parking is a town bylaw. And I think you looked into this, Judy, and it's in the traffic and safety regulation. It's not actually a bylaw.
right.
So we maybe have to take that word bylaw out and refer to the
Right.
traffic and safety rules that you can, that the
So we
police-
have, in the parking section, we say, per town bylaw, there is no overnight street parking on public roads and no street parking on public or private roads. It's actually the town of Chatham Traffic Rules and Orders, revised July 3rd, 1956. So they're an old set of regulations, not all of which are enforced, but,
So is that a bylaw?
no, it's a.
It's a regulation.
It's a,
So we should change.
I don't know if it's.
What is it called, traffic?
Traffic rules and orders. It's something separate, I think, than even the bylaws.
Traffic rules and orders. So that overnight parking is according to the Chatham.
They are
Traffic
recorded with
rules
the
and
town
orders.
clerk, so I'd have to get clarification whether it's considered a bylaw.
We can make that change so that word bylaw is out because
Yes, I will
that's
take
come up
that
several
out.
times.
So,
And then another, I think you may have addressed it, but will there be an online registration?
yes,
So you can download the
definitely.
forms, you can fill them out at home, submit them?
fill them out online, yeah, and we're gonna be, set up to take credit cards. Again, the fee is gonna be nominal, $50 to start, and, so we're hoping to make this a very streamlined, easy process.
And I wanted to add about the minimum of a weekly rental, that maybe,
We did have a comment from a citizen feeling that we should restrict the minimum nights that people can stay. Is that,
correct.
so, because their complaint is that people come in for one night, or 2 nights, but I think at this round of the rules and regulations that we're putting together, I don't think that's something we want to get into. That would be much more restrictive. I don't think that the committee that worked on this would support that change, type of a change.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. I think as we collect data and complaints, that may be something that comes up down the road that we deal with again. But right now, I don't think we want to go so far as to do that.
Okay.
Then you get into
You
weekends
can
and
see where
one-nights
people's
and-
concerns about something like that
But
is.
it's a concern,
Yeah,
and it's a legitimate one, but we're not doing it in this initial
Okay.
rules, which we're trying to keep simple, and we had a broad consensus from the working group. The other thing that's come up repeatedly really is parking. And we have a sort of a consensus parking statement in there, which is a little more general. You know, it has come up, there should be a number attached to it. Some towns have a number of cars per bedroom and all, but the working group and through us, we decided to be, for right now, to keep this general language about parking. We'll collect data, we'll see what the parking complaints are, and then that's something that may or may not be adjusted with time, but just with the number of nights, I think, would be the same.
Right, it may turn out that it's very difficult to determine how many people are in a home. And if there's a concern that there are far more people in the home than there are supposed to be, and there are 15 cars parked on the front lawn, then we might have to readdress parking as an indicator of how many people are in the home. Because we can easily assess how many cars are parked. But to determine how many people are asleep in there would require entering the home, which is much more difficult. So in the future, you know, when we collect this data and we have complaints to review, we may have to revise the regulations, and it may have to include something about parking.
I mean, to me, the easiest way to figure out how many people are sleeping in a home are to count the number of beds.
Yeah,
And
but
when I go in these properties and we find basements with, 6 bunk beds built in.
Fold-up sofas, air
Well,
mattresses, and there's some.
Yeah, and those are gonna be tucked away, I'm not gonna see them in an inspection, but when you go in and you see the house set up for 22 people to sleep in a bed, and you know that that's what they're
But
planning.
we're including children.
Yep,
And a lot of people come and they bring an air mattress, or they bring, and if they're bringing, if you have a 3-bedroom house that's okay for 8 people, and you have, 8 adults and 6 kids, that's a violation, and the kids may be sleeping on the sofa, they may be sleeping on an air mattress that they bring with them. And so it may be difficult to assess how many people are really in the house. We'll just have to see. This is the data that we'll collect.
No, I have a question. If someone is making a complaint to the Board of Health about a property, is that something they can do anonymously, or how do they do that?
It's a good question. Does the health department take anonymous complaints about
I mean-
overflowing septic or whatever?
It's kind of a policy issue. I mean, we usually will, but we could choose not to. I will take, anonymous complaints, but I don't hold as much, I don't take them quite as seriously if they're anonymous, but because,
But your initial approach, and you're in the habit of doing this with a number of other health department issues, so it's not.
Right.
But initially what you do, it's a phone call, it's a discussion.
right,
It's not a heavy-handed penalty
Right.
or fine, it's a discussion and a back and forth.
right. I mean, if someone calls
most things don't work out
anonymously
that
and
way.
has an issue with their neighbor about trash or parking or noise, I usually say, and they don't want to say who they are, I'm like, well, have you talked to them directly? Can we work that out and get back to me? We try and work things out that way. As you said, the next step would be for me to make a phone call or make a site visit and just talk to the owner and, say somebody, one of they usually know who it is, but,
The vast majority of things are worked out at that level.
yeah,
Right.
most of them, yeah.
When you do call the homeowner, you don't identify who made the complaint.
If they say it's anonymous and they don't give me the information, if they give me the information, then it's public record,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, and again, I would take that more seriously if they're going on public record. If they're just, a disgruntled neighbor who's pissed at their neighbor for something, might not even be related to the rental, who knows? Then, just kind of talk to them and say, this is
Yeah, yeah.
what I'm hearing, and,
And then,
we're not out there to be heavy-handed. We want to work with people, and, that's what we do.
yeah, in terms of inspections, so initially, the renter will fill out the affidavit, check things off, have the regulations, and then you're renting is not contingent on an inspection at that time. We're taking their word for it. As data is collected, time goes on, and there probably will be an inspection, as I understand it, of these short-term rental properties, but that'll be down the road as we ramp up. I know in Provincetown, because a person that worked there was part of our working group, I think their regulation is 4 years old, she said it took them like 4 years to get this thing organized and working in the way they wanted to, so it's not, immediate. So the inspections, it's not, you don't have to have your house inspected initially, right away, it'll come down the road, it'll probably
Yeah.
be something they get.
We'll start with a random sample of places, or if anything, rises to the surface with questions, then we may
Yeah.
do that, but.
Okay, and so, all right, so we want to have public comment, public information. Should we put forward a motion for, we can have public comment next, right?
Yeah, we'll do
Yeah.
the comment.
Okay, why don't we open up to the public, because we said it at the last, well, we do always, but at the last public forum, we said we would be discussing it again today, we'd go over things, and then there'd be an opportunity for people to have a comment or an opinion. So we can open up to the public. I think there are probably some people online, and there's some people in the room here. So are there a public comment or opinion about this?
Anyone in the room? Sir? And then I do have a couple online comments.
Test. John Berlin, concerned citizen. I was here last time. I would like to say that I think you did a pretty good assessment of the meeting last time. I think you brought out most of the topics that were addressed, positive, negative, whatever. I would like to possibly be a little bit controversial here. I went back and did a lot of research on all the meeting minutes all the way back to July of last year. I I spent a lot of time to get some details. In September 12th, Board of Health met. Judy indicated that the Board of Health had recently searched the MassGov website for registered rentals. The state site only lists properties by street name and not number, verbatim. Where did the BOH get a spreadsheet with numbered addresses and owners' names later in November 17th?
Is that a question?
That's a question, but you don't need to answer it right now,
Okay.
because I got some related. November 4th, you stated, Judy, according to the state registration for rentals, the map she has provided to the working group is 1,300 short-term rental properties in Chatham registered with the state. Question, you don't have to answer it right now. Is this public information with no personally identifiable information of any operator? Really? Will this be used to add a layer to the Chatham GIS system as noted in Appendix 51 and 52 of the annual town warrant? Quote, additional database work has included updating, creating maps and layers supporting various town efforts and specific entry for short-term rental properties map. Shortly thereafter, on November 17th, you indicated that you got a full list of rental properties. Where did this list come from?
Now I can answer?
Yes.
I believe that when I originally searched the state's database, it's a public entry portal, and they do not give the street addresses or names.
That's correct.
They just give the streets. The second list that you referred to, I think came from our finance director. I think that there is a way through the DOR that you can go in and get more specific information, and she did provide a list at that time. So if my memory,
All right, well,
correct.
Let me continue. Well, let me just interrupt. So it helps us to know, this gets very complicated, but what is your specific concern about the way this is going to work?
I will get right to that.
Okay.
Okay. The list of rental properties was titled, and it's in the meeting minutes as a part of the agenda in the documents, ROC registered property, which includes room occupancy account name, which is the owner's name, property type, property DBA, street including number, unit type, owner group, and one of two owner occupied, whatever that means. I inquired with the DOR, the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security, and the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. There's one Massachusetts law that comes into play, and there's a CMR, Code of Massachusetts Regulations. Chapter 23A, Section 68 and 400, CMR 4, and that has some subsets. Quote, in subchapter, or in Section 68, provided, however, that the location information for any accommodation offered for rent shall be limited to the name of the street in the city or town where the accommodation is located. Further, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development shall establish procedures and protocols to protect the confidentiality and security of an operator's personal information and tax information, and prohibits the disclosure of such personal information and tax information maintained pursuant to the section. 400 CMR covers, it has 4 points, but one of the points is data security practices, protocols, and standards, and quote, provided, however, that the location information for any accommodation offered for rent shall be limited to the name of the street in the city or town where the accommodation is located. Further, 4.04, personally identifiable information of any operator, but may include the certificate number. So names are personally identifiable information, and the street number is, it's not supposed to be on any list anywhere available to the public according to the state. So, again, you indicated where this spreadsheet came from the finance director. It could have only come from DOR, and there's those, I can repeat the Massachusetts general law, and I can repeat the CMR if you need be.
Yeah, would you, please?
Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 23A, Section 68, and 400 CMR 4.00. And it has 4.01, 02, 03, 04.
Yep. Okay. Well, that may be something specific to the DOR and their rules and regulations for tax purposes. As I said, I was surprised to get that list from the town, but someone got it.
Yeah, I'm surprised too.
But
And
as far,
apparently-
and I did state before that I am going to check with town council about the, whether we should be giving that information out if requested or not. It's not something we're gonna go and publish anywhere,
It's
so,
already been published, and it was in your meeting minutes and the agenda and the documentation. It's out there, 1,302 rentals,
yeah,
which is slightly old information,
yeah.
but it includes all this information,
And it-
including two key things, the street number and the owner's name. Now, this is apparently, is this public? The DOR doesn't think it's public.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
you can go out
that's
to the
something-
DOR and look.
That's something I'll have to look into, but I appreciate.
The Board of Health has not publicized the names of the 1,300 people in Chatham that are renting their homes.
It's in the documentation in the meeting minutes.
We listed the
November
names
17th.
of all 1,300
I
people.
never saw
Yes,
the
all
list.
Was it a Board
1,300.
of Health meeting or the short-term rental
I've got an
meeting?
example of it if
I
you'd
think it
like.
was the short-term,
In the packet?
in the,
It
one
was
of the
not a Board
short-term
of Health
rental.
meeting. We never did that in a
Never.
Board of Health meeting.
I've never seen a list.
Was
But
it a-
all the meetings.
you got the list. So my question is, where did it come from? And I got the answer.
Yeah,
You know,
that's-
is
my
this a breach
recollection
of
is that's where
security?
it came from.
Well,
Well, I-
it may be a breach of security, but it has nothing to do with
Well, it
the
wasn't our
regulation
security, you
that
know.
we're about, that we're considering.
You're gonna put this information out on the web in your GIS system.
No, we're not.
It's in the town
Why
warrant.
not?
No,
No, we're
You're
not.
gonna have a map of properties that people can look.
No.
no, we're
We
not.
said
No?
that- where is that written?
A51 and A52 in the town warrant, in the appendix.
Well,
That's specific.
that's, this
GIS
short-term rental is not, agreement isn't in the town warrant, as far as I know.
No.
What's, you know,
A51 and A52.
But your concern is just having a short-term rental owner's name and street number on their short-term rental database that the health department would be collecting.
Correct.
That's your concern.
Now,
Now, I would say one thing. So we
They're not
did,
gonna be
it's 2 or 3
published.
meetings ago, we had the town attorney actually review this, and it didn't come out at that time, but
Correct.
this is something we can get back to him with. Can we, in his opinion, can we legally, I mean, it's assumed you can because all the towns are doing it, I think, collect the owner's name or contact person.
Yes.
You can't have a,
I mean, I don't know what, the GIS
And a-
mapping on the town warrant, we don't, I mean, if we were gonna do some mapping on the town,
says-
we
it
don't need to go to
says-
town meeting to do
Yes, we-
that.
it
We're
says
certainly
to
not
add a
doing it.
layer on the GIS system specifically for short-term rental properties map. It's a layer.
But we don't need.
that's
to
not
go
something,
to-
that's not something that we did.
And it's not something you have to go to town meeting for either.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we'll have to look further into that.
I thought that you were dealing with short-term property rentals, and it's gonna be going onto a map. I made the connection.
We
I
haven't been a part of
apologize.
that. I don't know. There may
Yeah.
be some other
And-
way that thing is generated by
That
some
may
other
be,
entity.
that may be a zoning, look at it, because as
But
I
you
did
do,
say,
you
zoning
do
and
have a
planning.
map in your documentation.
Yeah,
So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, someone
Okay.
put that together, I can't
Well,
remember.
someone did,
who.
and I'm wondering myself, and I apologize, I'm wondering if this is public information.
That's not a very accurate map. If you look closely, I don't think you can tell. I mean,
I've looked at-
you can
I've-
take all the street names in the town's public record, in the state's public record, and create a map like that very easily. So It doesn't give you specific
This
streets.
is, as far as I'm concerned, my research, there it is very specific, at least in some cases.
I
Anyway,
mean, you can Google yourself in your house and will come up on a map,
I'd
so.
like my house, if I have one, to be private because it's not public information.
Yes, it
Well,
is.
there is an assessor,
You
there is.
go to the assessor's
office will have
database.
an owner and a street number and your assessed value of the house and the property
Correct.
and how many
Correct,
bedrooms.
but now it's gonna be a short-term rental. That makes a difference to me.
I see.
Well, I think what we need to do is,
Okay.
it's got,
Anyway,
this
Thank you.
regulation, when we pass this regulation, if we pass it, we need to ask the town attorney, when we collect the database with the name, street addresses of all the people that are renting, what level of security do we need to keep that?
No problem.
If
Yeah.
releasing that database to the public is a violation of some state statute, then obviously we won't release it. We'll have it for our own purpose, and just like we don't release HIPAA-protected information, if the state says short-term rentals are secret, then we can't release that. But we still can use that within the Board of Health for the purpose of this regulation.
Yeah,
What if there's a problem down the street and a neighbor calls the health department? Is this home a short-term rental? Does it come under your rules or not?
Well, the attorney will have to tell us. If,
Yeah.
if there's,
Can-
if it's on VRBO, then obviously
Make
it's
it
not a
work, you'd have to
secret.
be able to answer that question.
Right.
But we can check with the attorney.
yeah, I'll check.
Okay.
Anyone
And
else in? Dick?
Good afternoon. Dick Hosmer. I just have a question because I guess I fouled up and screwed up the time. Is there a quick synopsis of what changes might have been made in your discussion? Or is this for what you're gonna vote on?
changes since the public hearing, you mean?
Yes.
We have two.
No, we discussed issues brought up by residents at the public
But were
hearing.
changes made in what you're going to vote?
We have not, we haven't made any changes between then and now, but we have two that have come up tonight that we're going to make. One is, we're going to change the time you need to be in contact, which could be a phone call, from 1 hour to 2 hours, just to make it a little easier. And the other one, because people were concerned about that, but we still think it's important. The other is, there's been an ongoing discussion of whether the no overnight parking rule on the street is a bylaw or what. And Judy has looked at that, and it comes under the traffic rules and orders regulation in the town that the police department uses. It's not technically a bylaw, so we're
Right.
going to change it from bylaw to, and refer to the traffic rules and orders. Those are
Okay.
the only two things that I think thinking
Okay.
about changing. We're not changing anything with the parking, or any other,
I guess that was the crux of my question.
we did say that parking is an ongoing discussion. It was discussed at length in the working group. We came to a consensus
Right.
of what the parking wording should be, and it is what it is.
Okay.
And we'll collect data and see what happens, and if parking's an ongoing problem, maybe that will need to
Down
be
the
addressed in
road.
the future.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Nancy Kerner.
Yes, and you submitted the
Template. Yes,
the short, the
template.
template, yes. So you've been here the whole meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I admire your work. I'm just optimistic enough to think that all the time and effort that's going into this is for just a very few short-term rentals. I can't believe that there are that many problems that are going to keep making more and more problems for the town. Hopefully your rules will
calm things down for the few who are violating the rights of the neighbors. And that's one of my questions. We're providing all this information to the owners and to the renters. It's the neighbors who you're going to be hearing from. And I'm not sure people are aware of how they can contact help or where to turn if a rental property in their neighborhood is annoying them. I know that's not your job, but just, I think we have to keep that perspective in mind. My other question is, or statement, I keep hearing little mentions of inspections, which were not part of the regulations that I read. I fear regulation, inspection, yet another fee, yet another inspection, yet another fee. I hope that the inspections that you're referring to are not something that are coming about right away and that will really be deemed to be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy can correct me, but I think the regulation gives the Board of Health permission for inspections, if there's a problem. And what we said was, right now, when you register, you will not be required to an inspection at that time. It's envisioned down the road that the rental properties probably will be all inspected eventually. There's no time frame on that, but that would be under the same fee, the $50 fee. I think
There's a paragraph on inspection.
yeah,
Where is that?
Short-term rentals shall be subject to reasonable inspections and/or verification by the applicable agencies or departments of the town.
Yeah.
That's the statement about inspections.
and then
So if there are complaints and we have a hearing, then we could also have an inspection.
yeah. But at the initial first-time registration, you're going to state what your bedrooms are in the occupancy formula then, and check off the affidavit. We're going to take your word for it, and then inspections would come later. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, as we get in registrations, we'll, look through files and verify the information as best we can. And as I said, if something looks like it may be a problem, we may star that one for an inspection, but it's not our intent to go and inspect every property, especially the first
And the
year.
inspection wouldn't incur a separate fee that would come under your registration fee.
It would not, right.
Yeah.
So,
And I think the registration fee for like a cottage colony or something is more. I think it's $125 or something. And Nantucket's regulation for short-term rentals, I think their fee was $250. So the working group, we came to a consensus of a very, well, it depends on your point of view, modest $50 fee.
and
So-
your other comment about, how will the public know who to contact? Part of the working group discussion and decisions at the end was to come up with some type of a marketing plan to get the information to the public out there. This is all part of that, doing public hearings. Once we get, moving forward after the new fiscal year, and we have a staff person that's going to be designated to this, we'll be working on a website, and we'll be working on getting more information out to the public to let them know about the requirement to register and what they need to do if they need to contact us. So,
Yeah, so there's a public relations, public information part of this that's going to be ongoing, and we'll try to do the best. There was a good article in the Chronicle a couple of weeks ago, and there'll probably be more there for the
Yeah.
public.
they've been.
Okay, other people with comments, or,
I have Jim Agostine.
Yes, thank you. Jim Augustine, 70 Pondview Avenue. I've been following the process since its inception online, and I thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. I have another problem. I was the one that had brought up the idea of not requiring people to register or to be considered short-term rentals if you rented your place for less than 14 days a year. My wife and I, we've owned our property now for 14 years. We don't rent it, okay? But someday that property will pass to my children, and so I follow this with some concern about their loss of, full rights of ownership. Tonight I heard, or this afternoon I heard comments made about the release of information, like one of the gentlemen spoke about in particular. And the comment was made that any record submitted to the town, like a registration, would fall under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, okay? And so if I'm an owner and I rent my place out and a neighbor, is offended by something that the renter does, FOIA's the town, and they get my contact information, my cell phone number, okay? Now my neighbor, who maybe is not a nice person, has my cell phone number and decides that they're going to get even with me and, call me at midnight every night for the rest of my life. That's concerning. That's very concerning. And, I deal in the world of FOIA all the time, and I know the rules of it very well. And I know that sometimes people will use FOIA as a weapon just to be a nudge or something. So I'm very concerned about that, and think that, I think it's really unfortunate that this whole process has landed on the Board of Health. You have really important things to be doing, and I have a sneaking suspicion that when this thing becomes publicly well known to all of those people that are renting the properties and the problems that could arise from this, you are going to be swamped with problems that take you away from the important work that you volunteer to do. So those are my thoughts, and somebody could probably track down my cell phone number somehow with the internet. But it would require them to do some work to do it. To have it as FOIable really does concern me deeply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we will check with the attorney about the confidentiality and what's public information from the registration form. We will double check on that. And then the minimum, say you want to just rent for a weekend, I think you brought that up before, do you have to register? I think the state makes you register if you are renting as a short-term renter, period.
Right.
And so we're kind of following that. And that's how that came out.
And if his children inherit the house and decide to rent it, they'll have to register the property, right?
Okay. There was something else there, but I think, okay. Yep.
Elaine, do you have a comment? Elaine Gibbs?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to be brief, but it's about the parking again. I had asked that you consider, determining the number of cars per bedroom. And the reason I say that is it would be so much easier for the Board of Health, particularly when you're first getting on board with this, because there are so many homes that are going to be coming online that you have to look at, that if you say, 1 car per bedroom or 1 car per bedroom plus 1, then it's visibly seen by you from the outside, rather than having to make an appointment. Then everybody goes to the beach and the neighbor says there are 20 people in the car, 20 cars in the parking lot, but they've all gone to the beach. This way, and a abutter, if it's a consistent thing, can just simply take a picture of the cars, its exterior, and you guys can just do a drive-by without, having to go in and escalating the situation for everyone. It would be a simple indicator for the board and for the abutters. I don't think anybody is gonna report when a renter may have a party for a day, but if there are consistently 15 cars on the property, and it's a 4-bedroom, we know that it's overoccupied, and it would help your board determine that without having to go through phone calls and getting everybody upset. Just say, hey, there were 14 cars there, and that's in violation. So I really hope you would consider that, doing it now rather than waiting until later, because I think it'd be a lot easier on the homeowners, the landlords as well. I think they might be shocked to find out that there are 14 cars at their home, when they know they're being restricted. So again, I think it'd be easier to put it in now and see how it works, and that might eliminate the problem all the way around, because you have a visual, exterior way to determine how many people are actually using the house. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think parking was discussed extensively in the working group, and there were various opinions about what to do there, but the consensus was the language we have in there now without a specific number, at least for starts. Parking is a complaint, that you hear a lot, but that data will be collected and be reevaluated with time. But we kind of made the decision to pay a lot of respect to the product, to the draft that came out of the working group, because that was a real consensus of townspeople, and we would start there. I think that's not that the parking isn't a legitimate concern, and what you say isn't legitimate, but we're going to start here, and then we'll kind of go from there, I think. But are there other comments? Okay.
I'd like to do one more quick.
It's your sixth time up at the podium, but we want to hear from people.
But that's 2 different meetings.
That's true.
4 last time, 2 this time. Last time I brought up the big picture, and I was trying to say, well, how many houses, are across the street from a short-term rental, or what are their characteristics? They're the same to me. But since Elaine was on, she made a couple of observations in October 3rd and back in August about how many residents or residential homes there are in Chatham, and she indicated about 6,200. And she also indicated at a different time that the population, as we know, goes up to 35,000 during the summer. And I'm just trying to do some quick math here. That's about 6 people per dwelling or residential house, average. 6,200 minus 1,300 rentals equals 4,900 residential dwellings that are not summer rentals. And thus, and this is fuzzy math, admittedly, using the average of 6 per house, that means 4,900 times 6 equals 29,400 people, and 1,300 times 6 equals 7,800 for average number of people in summer rentals. About 25%. These are rough numbers, admittedly, but nobody can tell anyone how many people are in summer rentals. So I'm just using an average here. If this is true, if 25% of the summer population, with regards to septic issues and water quality, if that's the majority of the problem, is that the real focus? And this is just, the big picture. Are we looking at if the population of 35,000 is going to just summer rentals, that would be like 26 people per house, which only in some cases do we know that to be true, which is what the focus is, but certainly not all of them. Just something to think about. Parking, trash, number of people in the houses. Important problems,
Let me just make a comment.
Sure.
I don't know where that 35,000 came from.
Elaine Gibbs.
Well, she doesn't know. Nobody
Your mic?
nobody
His
knows
mic is on.
how many people were here. But that 35,000 could conceivably be that there are 35,000 people here for part of the summer, for a weekend, but there aren't 35,000 people here for 20 weeks from between May and October. I know enough about Chatham to know that the full-time homes in Chatham do not have 6 people per house every day for the whole summer. On my street, the average is 3. It is conceivable that on the 4th of July weekend, there are 35,000 people. But the bigger problem is that the rentals are fully occupied, for the most part, for the whole period of 10 to 20 weeks during the summer. You don't have full-time people living in Chatham who have their houses completely occupied for every day during the summer. It just isn't, that's not the way it works. And, and I asked, Bob Duncanson how many people were here in July of last year, and he has no idea. There's no way to know how many people are actually in Chatham.
Well, yeah.
Other than the fact that it's hard to make a left-hand turn on Queen Anne Road.
Yeah, I agree. It's a hard number, and that's very fuzzy math. But Bob did make the statement that if we have 1,300 short-term rentals, and I think that's a low estimate of short-term rentals, that's 25% of our year-round housing. So, I mean, we're looking at broader issues here of, housing sustainability and those types of issues in town. So 25% of our housing stock is being rented out as basically hotels and motel space,
To the max.
which is, and right. So, and many of them are being overcrowded. Not all of them, and maybe not a majority of them, but there's certainly a percentage of them.
And they're also bringing in $3.8 million in tax revenue, as well as property taxes.
Right. Well, they're gonna bring that in anyways, if they're a registered short-term rental, and, people are gonna come to this town anyways, whether,
But the summer population also swells with people renting B&Bs, motels, CBI, the Wayside Inn. I mean, it's, all that contributes to the population too, so it's a tough.
And I agree, there's just kind of no way to know how many people are in the short-term rentals.
Right, and to Judy's point, there's 1,300 currently registered with the state. I'd say a few years ago, that number was 700 or 800, and then last summer when we checked again, all of a sudden it was 1,300. So it's thought that that's probably it's going up pretty rapidly with COVID and all. And how many people who rent shorter periods of time don't bother to register, we don't know, but people guess it'll be more.
On the same token, there's more short-term rentals and there's more houses as well. That's probably doubled in the last 20 years.
Okay, other public comments?
I don't see any.
Okay.
If I could just, this is Elaine Gibbs, if I could just make one statement. I didn't say there were 30,000 people every day in Chatham. Dr. Bob Duncanson gave that number. Actually, they increased it a couple weeks ago to 32,000. They need it for all different kinds of things, liquor licenses, how many we can have. And sometime in the past, they had decided that at peak season, probably July 4th weekend in the parade, there are 30,000 people in Chatham. There's no way to know how many are staying in the homes, but we build everything to that capacity in terms of sewer flow and, infrastructure and that kind of thing. I never said that there were 30,000 people a day, but we don't know how many people are in rentals. And again, as Judy said, there are probably, we believe there's probably closer to 2,000 rentals because there was an indication there were maybe 700 that hadn't previously registered. So that's 1/3 of the residential properties in Chatham are rental properties. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear when I was being quoted. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so no other public comments. I think that that we do need to check with the attorney legitimately about this, what can be released publicly and how we collect that and all. And
Right, but that's not part of the
That's
regulation.
not part of the regulation.
That has nothing to do with
shouldn't stop
with the
regulation.
writing of the regulation.
Right,
That's how the Board of Health deals
How
with
it's
the
administered.
data as it's
Right.
collected. So I believe we can go ahead and vote on the regulation today with with two changes. One is increasing the time that the owner has to respond to 2 hours, and the other changes in the writing regarding the parking.
Taking out the word bylaw and say traffic rules and
Right,
orders.
so I'd like to make
Correct.
a motion that we approve the regulation with those two changes.
Okay, let me just ask Judy, so if what is public information, we can sort out later, it wouldn't change our registration or what's written in the regulation, and then we can deal with that as part of the administration and how that develops over time.
Yeah, it's not specifically part of the regulations, so
Okay, all right.
yeah.
you definitely
Okay.
can.
So I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the short-term rental regulation as the draft we have today with two changes. Contact time, instead of being 1 hour, is 2 hours, and the word bylaw under the parking rules is omitted, and instead, traffic rules and orders is put in there as the thing generating the rules. Okay, and then any public comment on that motion? Okay, then we can go ahead and take a vote, and maybe for this one, we'll take a roll call vote. Dick Edwards,
Aye.
Carol Boyce,
Aye.
Noble Hanson, aye. So it's 3-0, and it passes.
Okay,
Okay. All right. We have a couple of short things. So anyway, so that is passed. This draft has not changed much over a long period of time. We've done kind of some minor things. But I think, I'll just make my own comment. I think we've done something that's really good for the town. I agree with the comment. It may be a lot of work. There is going to be hopefully extra manpower for Judy and the health department to administer this. But I think it's something that's very good. So the next item on the agenda is an update on 32 Mill Hill Road, John McGrath. And Judy, I think, has an update there for us.
yes, I've had several conversations with people at DEP. They are very interested in our issues at the property at 32 Mill Hill Road, and then the Barn Hill Landing property that has been notified by the Conservation Commission of violations of the Wetlands Protection Act. So they want to start the process, but they've had a change of personnel. The person who came out and checked on the violations has since retired. So the new regime, so to speak, would like to come down. They're going to be coming down May 4th or 5th. We have to just clarify which date. And so that will be somebody from the Wetlands Division and the Solid Waste Division at DEP. They're going to meet with myself and someone from Conservation Commission, either the agent or her assistant, and we're going to show them the properties. So again, we're kicking it a little bit down the road, but I think we're making progress with them, and they are interested and engaged. So.
And then usually someone from the Board of Health will be there. I think I was there for the previous inspections, and John was there for some, but I would try to be there. We could have one other board member be there, but not three.
Yeah,
So we can,
I'm going to be away.
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll work that out.
okay.
I-
Yeah, I'll let you know the exact date and time,
Okay.
so.
Okay, good. And then we have minutes from April 3rd, which include the minutes from our public hearing. And anybody have a comment or a change? If not, a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes.
In a second?
I'll second.
Okay, maybe we can take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Couldn't find anything wrong with them?
Say, what? Oh. And then, okay, we can make a motion to close the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
A voice vote, all say, in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? Okay.
Thank you.